Ready or not, we are starting with the Power Lunch Live podcast for April 1st, 2022. Happy April Fool's Day. I don't know about anyone else. I've been disappointed by the lack of foolery on April Fool's Day recently. We need more. Like the corporations used to, their marketing teams came out with their best funny stuff, fake products, and I'm not seeing any of that, and I'm very upset.
I did one.
I'm not going to buy anything today because of that. No, except Dunkin' Donuts. I already bought that, I guess. Anyway, welcome to the Power Lunch podcast. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, what we do is we bring on 4 guests. I and my producer, Serendipity, not a person named Serendipity, just the force of Serendipity drives who comes on this show. And it usually works out pretty well. For example, by complete coincidence, 2 of our 5 people on this screen are from the state of Vermont, which makes sense because Vermont's a huge state with hundreds of people in it. So... and 2 of them are here. So we're going to go around and do quick introductions, and then we're going to each speaker has brought a topic that they want to lead us with, and we'll talk about it for a bit and then go to the next topic and whatnot. A couple of announcements before we get on to that, because it's my show. I get to pimp my stuff. You guys will get to promote your stuff too. But my show, I get to promote myself first. This Monday, I have a summit. It's called the Great Experiment Summit, April 4th. From 10 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. It is free to attend. Just go to guywhoknowsaguy.com/TGE and you can get access to that. There is a VIP pack with the recordings and all kinds of gifts and stuff, but you can get the entire experience, the networking, everything in the event, no cost. Just show up and bring your cool self. And then on Tuesdays, I do a live virtual networking event. It's called the Networking Brunch because it is breakfast time in the West and lunchtime in the East. Thus, it's a brunch. Also, no cost to attend, guywhoknowsaguy.com/netbrunch. And the next day, Wednesday, I have something every day next week, is the Affiliate Success Academy. So if you have an email list and you've heard that people make money from their email lists and don't know how, or worse yet, you've tried it and it hasn't worked, I'm going to be teaching the basics of how to take your audience, promote them good, valuable stuff they actually want to know about, and get paid for doing so. So that's at, I believe, 2 o'clock. You'd think I'd know what time my stuff was. I should probably check my calendar. That is at 1 o'clock on Wednesday the 6th. Go to guywhoknowsaguy.com/ASA for that. So enough about me. I also riff for a bit because that's how long it takes people to find live things on Facebook, and I want them to miss me and thus hear you. So let's go on to the introductions. To tell us about yourself, we'll begin with Angela Mulrooney. Tell us about yourself.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Angela Mulrooney. So I'm a retired dentist and I ended up getting injured. That's why I retired. So I moved into personal branding on LinkedIn through my company, unleashinginfluence.com.
And did somebody bite you? Is that how you got injured?
I wish that was what it was. It's actually a neurological injury from doing the dentist. So my career killed my career, unfortunately.
Oh, no, you got dentisted out.
I got dentisted
right.
out. I like that.
Next, Jeff, because he's next up on the screen. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. I'm proud to say that I am a father of 3, 2 of which are in San Diego. 1 is in New Jersey. I'm a great friend to everybody and a beautiful family member. I am an entrepreneur. I've grown 4 companies, and I'm just glad to be here because I want to speak on resilience.
Very good. And next is Amy.
Hello there, everyone. Michael, thank you so much for the invite. I'm one of the 2 Vermonters, and I am a Build Your Best Life coach and a retreat leader. We do retreats on the farm, and I'm also a green living expert.
All right. And last but not least, Dustin.
Hello, thanks for having me as well. And by process of elimination, I'm the other Vermonter. I am been in Vermont most of my life. I have lived 2 other places, but I am also a parent, and I'm a life coach for professional parents and for creatives. And in addition to doing the coaching thing, I've been performing, well, in some veins since kindergarten, but more professionally doing improv for about 20 years.
Very good. And so on the parenting, do you know when a joke becomes a dad joke?
Oh, that's my favorite new dad joke. I won't spoil it since I know the punchline.
When it becomes apparent.
I love that joke.
All right. So enough dad jokes for now. It's not enough dad jokes. It's just enough.
Never enough.
For now. So we're going to begin with Angela leading us off to talk about personal branding on LinkedIn.
Perfect. So what I have seeing in the marketplace right now is a lot of people are trying to find an exit path in the next 5 years, or they're trying to get themselves noticed as an entrepreneur. And if they're dealing with other businesses as an entrepreneur, then LinkedIn is this perfect platform to develop out your personal brand. If someone is looking to pivot into either going out on their own or finding the next corporation to work for, LinkedIn is another perfect platform. And the reason personal branding has become so much in the forefront is people don't just want to buy the perfect logo, the product. They actually want to know the story behind those things. And personal brand, they have the ability to actually humanize what people understand about the company. And people are looking for a great person that they relate to. They're looking for a person who has shared values. And if you are just hiding behind the wall of perfection, especially the wall of professionalism, it makes it quite challenging for people to get to know the person behind whatever you're selling, whether it's your services as an employee or services or product through your company. So that's where personal branding has really shifted focus in the realm of marketing. And the beautiful thing is putting yourself out there, sharing what you know, becoming a thought leader, and it doesn't cost you anything except maybe a good camera, a microphone, a lighting system, and that can allow you to change the world with what you know.
I like that. And so you're saying that people need to be less worried about having that perfect, polished, professional appearance and should be a little more improvisational, if you will?
Well, they still need to get their information across professionally, but all of the video production that we used to put into, like having all the lower thirds and all this fancy stuff that was going on, is actually not working as well as just setting up your camera, having it start, asking a question, getting into your content, and then telling people who you are. So having these like fancy intros are actually a massive deterrent because you've got 3 seconds to get someone's attention. If they're spending 1.5 of those seconds watching an intro that you spent a lot of money creating, then you're probably going to lose them before you even get to the meat of your information. And so it's used to work really well to brand yourself is actually, you need to throw that out and just get back to the organic.
Interesting. Which is, kind of what we do here. I mean, we have lower thirds right now. I can get them at will. I push a button, boom, lower third, done. And so there's a lot of technology that makes things easier, that lets you be professional-ish while also getting right to it and not having. I was on one live show and had like a 5-minute intro reel with all kinds of mini segments. I'm like, who watches this? If I was scrolling through it, I got this, I'd watch for 10 seconds and be like, next. But it looks very professional and polished until I scroll up to the next thing. But as I leave, I think that was very professional and polished. I'm not watching it, but it was amazing.
Yes.
Yep. And so anyone else, feel free to jump in and it's a lunch conversation. So feel free to chat.
So this is Jeff. So what I understand, Angela, is what you're saying done is better than perfect as far as the tools to get started on branding myself on LinkedIn. So I want to know, for my all intents purposes, I am a coach who works with the advocacy on mental illness, addiction, and suicide. I do a lot with individuals, both challenged and those who have loved ones who are challenged. How would I brand that type of service, from your point of view, on a LinkedIn platform?
So I would decide what you actually are in that realm. So you can name yourself the blah, blah, blah. Like, for example, my personal brand is the arsonist, burning down what's holding you back from unleashing your personal brand on LinkedIn. So pick what you are and then speak about 3 main topics and become masterful in those topics. And you want to ask the questions that you're hearing from your clients or from the families of your clients and start presenting information from their point of view, while showcasing how you feel about it as well. So it's not just about like trying to appease your audience anymore. It's really trying to show who you are, because then you'll attract the right people to you as well, instead of trying to be like, oh, I can be everything to everybody. Well, we can't. And that's where losing that perfectionism comes into play as well. And people don't trust perfect. Nobody likes being around someone who's perfect. They don't feel good about themselves. When they see someone who's human, who's had those highs and lows, it becomes really relatable. And I'm sure your stories that you have personally and professionally would be appealing to the right people who need what you're actually putting out there.
So it's more about the client than myself.
Well, it's about who, but also you need to figure out what your client, who your client is, that ideal client, how they think and ask those questions, but then all of you into the content that you're presenting, and presenting it from your opinion, but not talking from like an I perspective. I do this, I do that. It's like, well, this client went through this, and this is how I helped them to get through it. So you can be storytelling a lot through that while showcasing your personality. And just by being yourself on camera, that helps people to get to know you. When we try to be perfect on camera, that's where we lose any sense of who we are. We become very static, and we want to be dynamic on camera. We want people to start to get to organically know us from lots of different dimensions.
And so are you saying then that primarily video is the best way to use LinkedIn, or is it a combination of, written posts as well as video?
It is definitely a combination. When people try to dynamically know you, video is the easiest thing, because then you're not going to be perfect, right? You could have a perfect photographer, perfect copywriter when it comes to everything else, but on video, you're not going to be perfect. And that is what allows people to really get a sense of you. Another thing that's working well on LinkedIn is the newsletters. It's very preferred by the algorithm. And so if you can bring your personality into those newsletters, and they don't have to be long, like the ones that do the best for me are 1 to 3 minute long. It'll actually measure based on the word count how many minutes it'll take for someone to read. And if you can get your point across, bring your personality, write the way that you speak, don't go from that technical perspective, that can help people to get to know you while pleasing the algorithm, and then supplement that with video as well.
That's cool. Can I ask a follow-up? So I'm curious, how do you compare LinkedIn to other social media platforms as far as what does it offer us that, let's say, Facebook doesn't, or Instagram doesn't, or Twitter?
What LinkedIn really offers is the ability to get to that decision maker. Typically, the person whose profile is up is the person you're speaking to. Whereas on Facebook, if you're going after a company, you don't know who is actually running that platform. Same with Instagram. Probably the youngest person in the office who's running that company's profile. And on LinkedIn, that's not really how it works. Most people are doing it for themselves because it is about personal brands on there. They have the ability to build out a corporate presence on LinkedIn, but it's the personal brand that really wins on there. And if you want to get to the person who is the right person to talk to, you can get right into their inbox, which is beautiful.
Cool.
And of course, now you can do LinkedIn Live, which is a bit easier way to get LinkedIn video.
Yes.
Which I just discovered that if you're doing a LinkedIn Live, that video shows as your cover photo while the live is going on. Not that I was looking at my LinkedIn profile while you're talking. I was totally looking at my LinkedIn profile while you're talking. I was trying to figure out how to send newsletters, which I now realize I need to do because
I didn't even know about that piece.
Yeah, the newsletters seem to kind of bypass a lot of the gates to getting into people. So it's,
yes. Well, and it used to be you'd write an article and it'd be kind of crickets, whatever you wrote. But if you turn on creator mode, so that's what you have to do to access those LinkedIn Lives if you weren't a beta tester before. And it also gives you access to create your newsletter. I think you have to have over 150 contacts, which most people have that organically anyway. But that gives you access to those two other things. And once you start using those, it gives you this slow burn of releasing the information to the platform. And it goes way beyond your first connections. My newsletter, I have people who have joined who are third connections. So they don't even know someone who knows me already. They don't know a guy who knows a guy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's beautiful the way that they're pushing that out.
And how often does one do a newsletter? Ideally.
Depends on what works for you. I think you're allowed to do one per day. Mm-hmm. Most people are probably not going to go and read your stuff once per day. You might not even have enough content to produce once per day. I'm doing mine one a week. I have people who are doing them twice a month, once a month. Okay. Whatever is consistent for you, whatever you can keep up with is what I would suggest you do.
Cool.
So when you're planning those, Angela, do you do a bunch in advance and schedule them, or do you kind of post them when they're done?
You can definitely pre-create them. There isn't a scheduling system in LinkedIn, so you'd have to just put it on your calendar when you're going to put it out there. I find my most heartfelt stuff comes out organically on a weekly basis, right? I've pre-written, there's probably 20 articles sitting in there that I've pre-written. I'm like, oh no, based on what I heard this week from the people I've talked to, this is more relevant. So I'm going to write a new article. But you definitely have the option to create more evergreen that you can keep feeding out.
So one newsletter you can, I'm going to use the word blast out to many members in LinkedIn from your followers. Is that how you do that?
So your followers, they'll get invited to it. You'll see in your invitations list. Oftentimes someone is inviting you to follow this newsletter, or they're inviting you to become part of a group. So anyone you connect with will get invited to the newsletter, but based on the topic that you're speaking out on, it will get blasted out beyond your immediate network as well.
Cool.
So how come most of us are not using LinkedIn for those purposes? I don't get it. I mean, I go on Facebook, I use Instagram every now and then. I use my Facebook groups, and then obviously just word of mouth. Why haven't I gone to LinkedIn? Why? I'm sure I'm not the only one. You know, we have all these resources. So what's lacking from LinkedIn's point that hasn't attracted me to get there? And I've been doing this for many, many years. What do you think it is?
It's the legacy of what people think LinkedIn is for. People still think LinkedIn is a job searching site.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, and if you're an employee, absolutely, it is a job searching site. But if you're a business or an entrepreneur or someone who is a coach, a thought leader, then you have the ability to put yourself out there at that high professional level on a platform where people actually want to consume that. Facebook, they don't want that. They want more light and fluffy. Same with Instagram, with TikTok, it has to be entertaining. So this is where you can do your brain dump of your best stuff. Because the platform is full of smarty pants. That's what LinkedIn is for. And people are wanting that kind of information. They're not looking for entertainment. LinkedIn tried to launch stories on their platform and it bombed. It lasted about 6 months and then they're like, whoa, nope. Because people don't want to be sitting there watching videos and wasting their time. They want to get in, get great information, and get out and get back to their workday.
Yeah, that's some really good stuff. And yeah, you're totally right. That's a legacy thing because I've been on LinkedIn since 15 years. And I got on it, so I said, this will be powerful someday. I don't know what it'll do, and just nothing for me now, but I'm going to be on it because someday I'm going to need it. And, 10 years later, it came into its own development because originally it didn't have a newsfeed. Originally it was just you could message people and you could have your information up there. And without a newsfeed, there was nothing to engage. But now it's a much more engaged platform. But if you spend 10 years with it being a directory and then suddenly it gets a newsfeed, you're like, whoa, when did that get here? Kind of like Facebook has slowly evolved into being more of a content platform and less of a tell your story about your life platform. And that's definitely been, and some people haven't gotten that message. So, you'll have these more serious conversations and someone comes in and be like, woo! Because they're still in Facebook in 2008. So speaking of woo, hey, Dustin, tell us about improv.
Improv. Improv is great.
All right. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks for coming on.
All right. So not to get too in the weeds about it, but, it evolved as theater games and a lot of actors just use it as a training tool. And then there's a lot of people that use it for comedic performance. That's my favorite part about it. There's short form, which is what most people are more familiar with. If you've ever seen the show Whose Lines in Anyway, that's short form. That's most people that know improv that aren't actively involved in it know it from that show. So that show was a huge kind of gateway for a lot of people into improv. And so short form is just like that. It's lots of short games, they're generally called. And, it's kind of a framework where, okay, you know this is going to happen. You know that I'm going to call out different genres and you're going to have to change what you're doing, or you're going to have to talk in questions, or you're going to have to do accents, or you're going to have to guess who this person is, or any number of things like that. And everything within that is made up based on like audience suggestion. Long form is what you generally are going to see only if you go to like an improv theater or a comedy theater. There are some long form specials if you look on Netflix or something like that, but that's going to be anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour of a group, whether it's 2 people or 6 people or 8 people, doing one story based on one suggestion. And so it can just be one scene and just be one whole 10-minute scene that takes place in the same place with the same people. It can be one scene with lots of different characters. So even if you only have 2 people doing a show, they can still do lots of different characters, which is lots of fun as a performer because it's a bigger challenge, and as an audience member because it's more chaotic and you're more likely to see people screw things up. People like watching SNL to see people break character the same reason they like watching NASCAR for the accidents. So that can be a lot of fun. And then with the longer ones, if you have a group of people, it can be multiple different scenes. You can have one scene with some characters, another scene, completely different characters, but still based on that same one suggestion. Maybe a third scene based on the same suggestion with completely different characters. And then you go back and forth between the scenes, and then there's other characters that intermingle, and sometimes some of the characters from one scene will enter another scene. By the end of the show, they're often all connected somehow, and the improvisers have tied it all together with a bow on top if they're really good. And you can do all sorts of stuff. There's musical improv. I've seen groups improvise a Broadway musical where they just got a suggestion and there was someone on stage playing keyboard, and they would be doing a scene, and then whenever the keyboarder felt like it, usually they would just start playing music, and then people would have to launch into a song about whatever it was they were talking about and make it make sense in the Broadway version of making sense. And then you kind of alternate back and forth. And when the group is like that, they've been together long enough, they can kind of play off of each other. They will know when it's a good time to have a song. They can kind of subtly cue. They can kind of start singing even before the music starts if they're like, this is a good time. I've also seen groups do hip hop improv where similar to that, but instead of someone playing keyboard, you have someone beatboxing on the side. And so they're there ready and waiting. And when they feel like it, or when it's a good time, or when it would just be something that would be really silly to have a hip hop or rap song about, they'll just start beatboxing, and the people on stage will have to start rapping and come up with a hip hop song about that, whatever they were talking about. I saw that one time. The scene was, there was supposed to be kind of a group of women on Long Island who were having brunch, and they were talking about the different pastries they had. And then the beatboxer started, so they had to do a whole rap about pastries. And one guy went on a whole riff about Entenmann specifically. It was pretty great. All sorts of different varieties of that. And a lot of professions, kind of higher level, high stress professions, will use improv as training as well, where like lawyers, CEOs or other corporate executives will oftentimes have a improviser come in or a group come in and teach an improv workshop so that people get better at not being so stiff and thinking on their feet, especially lawyers. So that's, I think, a good background on improv. I've personally found it a lifesaver in my parenting, in helping other people, other parents as well, but in my own parenting, just being able to kind of be silly and turn things into a game. And so then instead of having big power struggles. You just have games about everything.
Yeah, I find it interesting that improv is what you do, because for my personal self-care, years ago, I used to watch a show, and you're probably familiar with it. Whose line is it anyway? Whose line is it anyway?
That's the one I mentioned.
What's that? Oh, you did mention that?
Mm-hmm.
They're coming live to New London in 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Oh, they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think Curb Your Enthusiasm is another one of more of an improv type of scenario. And
yeah, so that's actually a good example of long form versus short form. So Whose Lines Anyway is a bunch of short form games. Curb Your Enthusiasm is improvised based on the world that they're in. So all of those characters are going to be the same. And, you know, the writers will kind of come up with ideas. Okay, you're going to be in this situation. You're going to be at a dinner, or you're going to be at a reception, or you're going to be at a baby shower, or whatever it is. And now let's put those characters there and see what happens. And so then they'll go in, they'll improvise, and they'll just run film and do it a bunch of times, improvise. Okay, now let's do it again and try this and see what happens. And then they can just see whichever one comes out the best and release that episode.
So Dustin, you go into companies and do improv workshops, or how do you work with improvs?
Yeah, so I haven't done that too much here and there. I have a friend of mine, an improv friend, who does that a lot. They fly him out and he will, you know, do their retreat or something like that. Oh, okay. And if there's any CEOs watching, I'm happy to do that. But yeah, there's that. I've taught improv camps for kids, for like elementary schoolers, which is just a fun thing for them to do, because they don't have that sort of filter. They're not so self-conscious about like, oh no, I need to do this right. They just want to have fun and be silly, and so they're usually great at it. And I perform improv myself on stage in a few groups, and like I said, I use it in my parenting. I use it in my coaching to help people with that. So yeah, it helps in pretty much every area of life.
Cool.
Is there a minimum
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anna. No, go.
So I remember in high school, I was in grade 9, and I took drama class thinking that it'd be like learning monologues or something like that. And every day, she only once because she could see how shy I was. So even just now thinking about improv, I can feel myself sweating. How do people get past that? Because it is a skill. Like even when you're in panel discussions or this kind of situation, letting go of that perfectionism to be able to just like lean into what you're doing is a massive skill that most of us, it doesn't come naturally, especially if we are trained at a certain point. Yeah,
that's true. That's a good point. I would say the best way to get past it is kind of like anything, doing it. Just like the best way to get good at sit-ups is doing sit-ups. The best way to get good at cooking is cooking. Now, that's not to say that you should go out and jump on stage tomorrow. I think probably the best way, if you are that nervous, is to find a class or a group that has, private rehearsals or something like that, where you can get really comfortable with it. That's how I got into it, because when I first started, I was actually very shy and had only seen Whose Lines Anyway on TV. I'd never seen it live. And it was actually when I got to college, there was a group there and they had open practices. So I went just to watch because I'd never seen it live before. They were very patient and said, okay, that's fine. You can just give us suggestions. We need those anyway. But they kept encouraging me to get on stage. No pressure, but they kept encouraging me. And so by the end of the practice, I had gotten on stage just to try it, because there was no one in the audience once I was up on stage. So there was really no one to judge me. And then I just never left because it was amazing. Just everyone was very supportive, and the creative rush of adrenaline you get from just going up there, not knowing what you're going to say or talk about, getting a suggestion, and then going is is great. I would prefer that sort of adrenaline than I would to go on a roller coaster.
Me too. I actually took one of those in New York City where I grew up. There was an Actors Institute, I think it was, and I was 13 or 14, and I took one of these weekend workshops on improv. And I remember one of the craziest exercises where they had 3 people come up on the stage. One person had to come from love, the other person was hate, and the other one was, I think, indifference. And you had to talk to each other all at the same time, interacting from that place. And that was crazy. And then we had like 15 minutes to prepare a character. And so I decided I was going to be a ballerina at that time because I was doing gymnastics in real life. And then the girl right before me did ballerina. And I was like, oh, geez, I can't do the same thing as this person. So somehow this idea came to me of like TV evangelist. And it was wild. I had everybody in the audience was like on their knees doing these praying things. And it kind of freaked me out because I thought, holy crap, I didn't realize that this could be that powerful. But it was such an exciting moment. I still think about it periodically when I think about, you know, talking in front of people or leadership type stuff. So I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, that's great. What a great story. I've done stand-up as well, but they're very different because in stand-up, the upside compared to improv is that everything's written. So you don't have to worry about not being able to think of something. You've written all your jokes out before. The downside is that everything's written. And so if you don't remember the joke as you've written it or as you put it in order and you just blank, then you're just sitting there on stage by yourself with everyone staring at you. Whereas in improv, if you can't think of something, there's other people usually up there with you that can bail you out and help you out with that. So they're both comedy, but they're very different.
Ah, for sure. I have tremendous respect for that, especially stand-up.
Is impromptu synonymous to improv?
I mean, I guess, you know, if you look at really the linguistic definition, yeah, they're pretty similar. But I don't think anyone would say I'm going to go to an impromptu show.
Because, I mean, we could, on this show right here, if Michael would give us a topic and we have 25 seconds to talk about his topic off the top of our heads. That's impromptu, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would both actually, improvisational too, right? Isn't it both?
It's what?
It's both improvisational and impromptu.
Yeah, that's true. One of the kind of fun things to do sometimes in improv, usually more as a practice, but sometimes for a performance game, is, and this is something that terrified me when I first started, I've gotten much more comfortable with it, because is just monologuing improv. I was much more comfortable being in a scene and kind of, you know, making up a conversation as a character, but just being out there by yourself and talking about anything. I've come to understand that actually, if you don't know what you're talking about, it's funnier. So, you know, when I first started, I was like, oh, but I don't know anything about that. I can't talk about it. Well, then just make it up. In fact, just make up something really ridiculous. You could even be given a topic about something that doesn't exist, just to make it all the more ridiculous.
I'm reminded of when I had a radio show on WBLQ. It was live radio, terrestrial radio, and we were supposed to have guests. So it was a 1 hour show, which means a 44-minute show, which means 2 22-minute segments. And I was warned that filling air is one of the hardest things in the world to do. Mm-hmm. And one of the people who regularly did solo, he would tell me, people would walk up to him and be like, what you do is not that hard. You just talk to a microphone. He's like, really? Like, yeah, you just talk. It's like, yeah, but you can't stop. Well, how hard can that be? All right, start talking. I'll time you. How long can you go? And on average, of course, there's people on the spot, but on average, people would, they talk for a bit and they'd be like, I don't know what to say. Like, you just got a fine from the FCC. How long was it? 42 seconds. But so I always lived in fear that if the guest didn't show up, and I didn't know the guest was showing up until they walked through the door. And all these guests, 10 o'clock show, they're showing up at 9:58. Right. So I'm sitting there being like, are they here? Are they here? Because if they didn't show up, I had 44 minutes of air with one break. And the break could be earlier or later, but the earlier the break started, the longer the second segment was, because there wasn't a way to stretch the break. So I had 44 seconds of air, and if I completely fell flat, they could go to music or something, but that would be, bringing absolute disgrace and shame to my family and never show my face in Westerly again. So I had to fill this much time just riffing, and I feel like now I could totally do it, partly because, as I said, you get good at doing it by doing it. I've probably done 200 Facebook Lives and however many interviews, however many of these. I do morning motivation, which is a 2 to 5 minute, one shot record thing, which is in episode 460. So with practice, I could probably riff 30, 60 minutes, as long as my voice holds out. But if you don't have the practice, just being ready to go from one thing to the next is a whole, and it's not that it's hard to think of what to talk about. I'm just holding forth right now and taking up all kinds of time. But it's not as hard to think of it. Is that when you have the oppression, I know as soon as I stop talking, someone else will. Knowing that as soon as you stop talking, the clock starts ticking, and you've got 9 seconds or whatever until the FCC decides it's dead air, and now that station owes a fine. And just knowing that, when you're like, it's really, really important that my mind not go blank. Your mind's like, what's that you say? Really important. You are in trouble. So it's the psychology of it.
Yeah, well, and that would be even more difficult because you're being yourself, whereas on stage you're being a character.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you go blank and you've already established the character, that can just be a character choice. This character has temporary lapses sometimes. Yeah. Or, this character, thinks that, sandwiches are made out of cheese and hippopotamus meat. It doesn't really matter.
Depending on the sandwich. But, and also if you have an audience, you can work with that audience.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can get that engagement. So if you go blank, there's all kinds of recoveries off going, go-tos that I have now. If I'm ever on a stage and I go blank, then I'll be talking, I'll pause, turn to the audience, be like, you ever have one of those moments where your mind just goes blank? Because you just saw one from me. And then they laugh, and then hopefully you now bought enough time to get back to it. Now you're human. And there's all kinds of things you can do with it with an audience that you can't do with a mic to the void.
Yeah,
So,
but isn't it also-
that actually kind of links to what Angela was talking about too, where you're just kind of calling yourself out. You're not trying to be perfect in that sense. You're just saying like, yep, yep, I'm human just like you are. Even though I have a microphone, doesn't make me any less human.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Well, I have lived experiences when I'm on stage speaking in front of people that if I forget, I just don't say anything. I just stay there because the audience doesn't know what is going on. They think it's part of the presentation. And so without saying, oh, I forgot, or I embarrassed myself, I just stand there calmly. I take some breaths, and now my brain starts to come back to me, my thinking, and then I start in again, and they didn't miss a beat.
Well, and that could be a great move too, because if you just go, you share a thought and then you pause and you take that, now the whole audience is like,
They totally ran in.
Pregnant pause.
What's next? What's next? It sounds like you're just being wise and
Right.
gathering for the next brilliant thought.
There you go.
Or being Shatner, either way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Jeff, let's segue over to you. Tell us about resiliency and one of my favorite topics, monetizing.
Well, yeah, monetizing is great, but there's a backstory before I get into my topic. The backstory is very short, even though it's a lengthy backstory, is my history of being successful personally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially came to a halt at the age of 52 when I was diagnosed and challenged with bipolar. That being said, I lost everything that I had built in that 52-year time frame. So how resilience came into my life is after my recovery, which was many years, and going in and out of hospitals and medication and doctors and therapy. But I ran 4 companies prior to all that. I thought to myself that I know what goes on in corporate, at least from my perspective and my experiences. And I put together a program to help not only CEOs, but sales pros, executives, warehouse individuals, marketing people, administrators on how to pay attention and maybe be cognizant of mental health, addiction, and even suicide ideation. And what I've experienced from that time, and I started this company approximately 4 years ago, is there is a wide need for awareness. And every time I walk out of a organization or a company, small, medium, I haven't hit the Fortune 1000. I stay in the mid-size and smaller organizations because that's where I came from. I came from, I guess you would call my company a small company, but it was a multi-million-dollar facility that people, individuals, they like to learn more when it comes to mental health and self-care. Because self-care is what I explain as something that we are not given as human beings. Self-care is something that I believe we have to claim. And how are we going to claim it when we go from our home environment and bring it to our workforce environment? When we see people, we walk through the front door, you're walking to your office, and people are just not paying attention to the environment. And there may be things going on, and we're not listening to those people. I don't mean verbally, but maybe with physiology, or the way they stare, or the way they look at their computer screen, or how many times they get up from their chair to go to do something as opposed to sitting at their desk productively. So that's where the resilience comes in. And there's all types of resilience. It's not only mental, it's emotional, it's social, it's physical resilience. And I build on those characteristics on self-improvement. And so that's why I do it. So people would not have to go through what I went through, because if I was listened to prior to my diagnosis, possibly I wouldn't have had to declare bankruptcy twice, close my company, get a heart attack, go through a divorce, lose every property I've ever had, all my money in the bank, my retirement plan, end up on medication, and go through a nervous breakdown. That's a whole lot to go through and still be standing like I am today, now speaking across the country, helping others maintain their companies, maintain their identity, and come back to a place where they now could work within society productively, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and absolutely financially. So that's the gist of the empowerment that I've given people. A great example is yesterday, I was in front of a prosecutor's office in a proscenium stage area, and I guess Dustin would be familiar with improv. There were about 150 police officers there, and I was at the bottom of the stage, and they were there for a purpose. They wanted to hear more about mental health and law enforcement. How police officers approach somebody if you get stopped, if they get called to a home for some type of challenge, and somebody calls the police, and they wanted to hear some real lived stories. You see, I've lived 3 stories with law enforcement in my challenge of mental illness. 2 of them were terrible. 1 was a great story, and that's what they wanted to hear. And I tell you, these cops were so in tune, not only to know more about how to approach me if they see some type of indication of my eyes, my physiology, not alcohol on my breath, but other things, so they would not escalate the situation to where they may have to arrest me and bring me down to the station. Because, as you know, or you may not know, bipolar characteristics are mood swings, right? So being stopped can actually trigger a mood swing in myself, not purposely, but what are you going to do with that? So the whole process, I mean, it was a great hour and a half with these guys, and it was well appreciated. So, I mean, that's why I want to talk about resilience. And the way you monetize it is, once awareness is brought to, let's say, a CEO, an executive, what that does is working with the people around you in a positive, engaging way, not shy to mention any type of indication of mental health or just self-care. And what that does is builds productivity, because now it's a safe environment. Once you break it out, once you break the conversation and open it up, now people are feeling a whole lot safer as to who they are, perhaps, even though they don't share it with anybody. Maybe they have selective disclosure, or maybe there's non-disclosure, and any disclosure is okay. But once management brings up the concept of mental health and how important it is, psychologically, they're at their desks feeling so much better. Because before that ever happened, they're always they're thinking about their mental illness and how it could have, and how people are maybe looking at them. You see, that's what happens because of the stigmas. They think people are looking at them in a different way, because first of all, nobody knows. And when you keep a secret, you're very, you're very like in tune to think that people know exactly what's going on, because you're not authentic. But if it's open in the air, and now everybody's aware of mental health, they're aware of addiction, they're aware of suicidal ideations, nobody's pointing fingers, but it's just opened up. They feel a whole lot more comfortable walking through the office, being at their desk, eating at lunch, and talking to somebody. And if they never disclosed, that openness at that lunch table, or if they go out to lunch, may have them disclose to a friend who they feel safe with, and they have confidentiality. Now they are actually giving themselves the will to get better. Because when I know for a fact, when I was in denial and I never said anything to anybody, my company, for one, was going down the tubes. I was going down the rabbit hole. I was sabotaging myself. So that's very important. It's a key topic. It's so powerful, and so many people want to hear more about it, and they want to live it through my vicariously, maybe through my through me. And I give that to them, and it actually is so fulfilling. But that's how the monetization actually increases. Because if your internal is really working to capacity in all areas, physical, mental, social, emotional, then your productivity definitely increases. people actually show up to work and they don't take days off. Think about that. Why are people taking their days off? Yes, they want to take a day off, but do we really know that they're just not under their covers in bed, really crying in depression? We don't know that, but they've taken so many days, or they come in late numerous times. Those are indications. Those are signs. That's a listening skill that now I coach people, I guide people on how to pay attention to that, and maybe the approach with somebody who is involved in that type of situation. The approach is key. So yeah, in a heartbeat, that's it.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Anyone have any thoughts they would like to share on that topic? Yeah, go ahead.
There's still so much taboo about asking personal in the workplace. In my mind, I envision this huge road ahead of trying to change the culture of businesses to be accepting of this, because people are afraid. They are afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being stamped with that. And, if they do something wrong, it's like, well, they're mentally ill, and, let's find a way to get them out of the company. So there's a lot of that fear behind this. And leadership is uncomfortable asking those questions because you don't want to feel like you're harassing someone. And there's, the Me Too movement has promoted a whole bunch of more awareness about jumping into personal spaces. Yes, that was a totally different thing, but I think people are afraid the same thing is going to happen when it comes to the mental health and, even overall health. So how are you helping people to move past that fear so that this does become an open conversation, because it's so uncomfortable for so many people?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. What I've experienced and what companies are doing with me is they themselves are not calling a meeting and talking to their employees on mental illness or addictions or suicide. They may be actually challenged with it, but they're not going to stand in front of their organization only because of what you just said. So they call me in, and what I do is first I tell my story. Right? I tell my story in such a way, and I'm working my way to do a TEDx talk on it, but I have a story and I share it. And as I share the story, I don't talk exactly for the disease itself, but what I actually start talking about is awareness, stigma, bias, criticism, physiology, and I role play. I role play in that room. Let's say there's 50 people there, and there have been. I would ask permission. Can I role play with you? And obviously, they either say yes or no. And I bring out an example of how to support me. Let's say I haven't disclosed anything in the company, and the person I chose to work with me in this role play, I would tell them what to say. Like, Jeff, I noticed that you get up a lot. Can I help you in any way? I'm always here for you. I mean, or if they're friendly with that individual in the company, that person could come up to me and say, Jeff, can you tell me more about how you're feeling today? Because that would give me maybe a safe way to understand, because of them viewing me, that I'm just not feeling well in that company just by my physiology. So what I do with companies is I don't talk about the disease. I talk about the ramifications. I talk about the stigmas associated with it and the biases that come through maybe society on not wanting to maybe open up to HR or go to your boss and say, listen, I have to share something with you. And legally, I mean, you can't get fired. I mean, there's all types of governmental laws for that. However, it's still shameful maybe to say something to your employer with pride. not being ashamed, because there's really nothing wrong with mental health, addiction, and suicide to be guilty or ashamed about. But again, I'm going to say that stigma and bias, it shames us all. So if we could maybe talk about it, that's all we need to do. Just like we talk about cancer, and you've heard this before, and diabetes and lung cancer and whatever you may be going through, it's okay. It's okay to say to somebody, you know, I have depression, or I'm anxious, or I am challenged with bipolar, because the way that I bring out the strength in myself with all my successes from the past is I am not my disease. I am not. I'm Jeff, who just happens to have a disease. Okay, great. Tell me something I don't know. I'm still Jeff, who empowers companies, who can grow companies, who can make money, who could do everything he's done, but I just happen to have this. And that's what my purpose is to make an understanding that it's okay to have these things. And, you know, we don't, you know, having a disease in mental health is not a precursor for you, or when I say you, it's a rhetorical you, for you to take furniture and throw it against the wall, or start, you know, yelling at the top of your lungs in the middle of the office space. You know, it doesn't happen like that. But there are extremes. You know, there's extremes with everything. But the majority of us, if we've all taken economics, we live within that median curve, right? We're stuck there, and you have your ends, right? The bad ends, the best of ends. So the majority of us really want to be aware and want to help others. You know, by nature, humans want to help each other. We do.
Well, so this has been some really good stuff and some really powerful content. While I am not the clock, I am bound by the clock, and the clock is telling me that we are running out of time. But this has been another great hour. Serendipity, good job once again. I'm assuming it's that way. I don't know. It's a universal force. So we're going to go around. Quick parting comments. If you have anything you want to invite people to, or suggest they do, or a freebie on your website or whatever, now is the time to tell them. Hopefully the website you gave me is the one where the thing you want to send them to is. And I know, Amy, we weren't able to get to talk about vision boards, so you'll just have to come back on the show again.
Sounds like a plan.
We'll have you talk about then. So let's do a quick round. We'll start with Jeff. Give us your parting comments and invitations, and however you want to sign us off.
Well, first, thank you, Michael, for having me here. I thank everyone for listening. What I would suggest, if you want to know more, you want to set up a one-on-one, you want to just take a strategy call with me, you can get to me by going to jeffnewman53@gmail.com. You can go to jeff@rometraining.com, Rome like the city. And you can also go to my website, rometraining.com, and you'll get to my website. You can go to also just my Facebook group, and it's Corporate Crazies in an Imperfectly Perfect World. And it's a great group. A lot of people go there, not only for mental health, but for personal development. And you'll pride yourself by going there and checking it out.
Very good. And Angela.
So if you have a misconception about how LinkedIn can actually help you with your personal brand, and you still think it is a place to get a job, I'd love to have a chat with you. You can reach me at unleashinginfluence.com/contact.
All right. So if there's a cavity in your LinkedIn knowledge, then
I need to start using that. I need to get my dental references back up.
That's what I do. All right. And Dustin.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. And if anyone listening is a parent that wants to bring more fun and play into their parenting, and not have it be a power struggle or a chore, or as a creative who wants to be able to do more with their creative gifts, or if anything I said just struck a chord with you, no pun intended, then by all means go to my website at talkwithdustin.com. It's on the screen there, talkwithdustin, Dustin, talkwithdustin.com, and you can book some time on my calendar, and we can just have a one-on-one conversation, and I'll see how I can help you. And whether we work together or not, in my experience with all these calls, you'll walk away with more clarity, and you'll be very renewed and refreshed and revitalized.
Good. And Amy.
Great. So I would love to offer people to join me for my next virtual vision experience, which is on Saturday, April 23rd at noon Eastern. It's free. You get to get really clear about what you want to create in the next year. And I think of vision boards as sort of an order form to the universe. So if that appeals to you, on my website, just go to the vision board tab, and then there's a form to sign up. So I'd love to have you join me.
Very good. And again, got a couple invitations here. On Monday, we have the Great Experiment Summit. GuyWhoknowsAguy.com/TG is a free day-long summit. We have 16 speakers and a whole bunch of breakouts and networking and whatnot. Tuesday, you can join us for networking brunch, which is noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Apparently, I'm the only one who thinks that brunch idea is funny because I say it and nobody laughs. But I think it's fantastic, and you can't forget what time it is at least. So GuyWhoknowsAguy.com/netbrunch. And then Wednesday, we've got the Affiliate Success Academy, which is a free workshop at 1 o'clock on how to monetize your audience by providing them the value of curating offers for them, because most people want to find good programs and would really appreciate if you found them the good ones and don't mind you getting paid for it. So there's that. Of course, you can join us here every week at 2 p.m. Eastern and whatever time it is in your area. What's that? That's like 7 in England, I think, and 11 in the Pacific. And just go to timedate.com and they'll tell you what time it is. 2 p.m. Eastern every Friday. And we always have 4 or more or less interesting people having interesting conversations about all kinds of different stuff. So thank you to our guests. This has been great. Stick around for a second after we go offline. And for all of you watching at home, see you next week.
Thank you.